Well, here we are. Today, I want to talk about a whole lot, but specifically, I want to talk about a few things when it comes to mixing bass and mixing electric guitars. First is I have to show off this bass trick that I have been using for quite a while now. This will thicken up just about any bass you throw at it, but boy, does it work really well in rock and metal and more distorted bass guitar tones. So let's take a listen to this track that I have here, and then I'll dive into the bass tone and how I can thicken it up in a few main ways. So let's take a look at the bass and what that sounds like. Specifically, we'll go here where there's some higher parts and some lower parts. So there's a lot of thickness, a lot of low end. But let me go ahead and I'm going to turn off some of the plugins that I have here because I'm using Parallax for the actual distorted tones. I'm using NV2 for upwards and downwards compression, which I absolutely love. And I'll get to that in just a second. And then I'm using RBass. Now, if you don't use RBass, I'll kind of explain what this is and why I think it's so helpful. So first, let's start with the raw DI tone. This is what the DI tone sounds like by itself. Then it's going into Parallax. Then I'm going to go into some upwards and downwards compression. So MV2 is upwards and downwards compression. Typical compression is just downwards, where you push anything that goes above a certain threshold down. But there's also the low-level content. So anything that goes below a certain threshold, you can bring up. It's really nice for locking in bass, electric guitar, or acoustic guitar is another great use case of this. But specifically bass, it works really well on bass. And so then I'll just use a bit of compression there. And it sounds really good. But there is an issue where these higher notes just lack some of that sub content that I am used to getting out of this. So let's take a look. So anytime we go to the higher notes, we're lacking a lot of that sub content. It's kind of a bummer, especially like on these riffs that go up an octave and down an octave. We're missing some of that stuff. It almost feels like the bass just kind of drops out during those points. So I've been using RBass for the longest time, but I want to explain why RBass works and how you can actually do it in other tools with other ways as well. So first, let's go ahead and let's take a listen to what RBass is doing, and then I'll break it down in the EQ and how I actually do it in the EQ itself. So it's adding a lot of low-end rumble. It does a really good job at being able to thicken up the low end, even on these higher notes that are here. And adding a lot of that sub-content and that low-end content. So here is what RBass is actually doing. It's adding some frequencies down below that you typically wouldn't expect. Oh man, my camera's doing it. I think it's time to buy a new camera at this point in time because, you know, it's just what's going to have to happen here. Let's open up Paint. All right, so this is what's typically going on. You have a lot of, sub-low content. You have that like 50 hertz and below, that 80 hertz and below. And then you have, an octave higher, which is 100 hertz. That's a full octave. And then you can go further than that, which is 200 hertz, and that's a full octave. So every time you double the number, that's a full octave. Each note is representative of or each frequency is representative of a note. And so in this case, 50 hertz or 55 hertz would be an A note, 110 would be an A note, 220 would be an A note, 440 would be an A note. So what I want to do is I want to understand where all of these octaves are and figure out where the fundamental is riding in my bass. So if we're playing an A note on a lower octave, and then we slide up to a higher octave when we're playing that same A note, the octave, literally, the fundamental changes from 55 hertz to 110, or 110 to 220 if they're playing that A note. And that's how this works. So RBass can actually add some low mid content, and it's more like psychoacoustic, where it actually sounds like it's adding more low end, more sub content, but it's actually adding some frequencies just above that. It's really, really neat. So let me show you how this would work on an actual EQ. So let's figure out what note we're actually hitting. We are hitting a G. So all we got to do is we got to figure out G note 2 hertz, and we can just type that in to Google, and it's going to give us a pretty awesome answer, a pretty simple answer. Basically, right here, G4 above middle C is 392, and then of course we have 49 hertz, G1, 98 hertz, which is G2. So I know that I am playing G. I'm in G minor for this. So I know that that's what's going on. I know that these are the notes that I can then use. And so what I'll do is I will then locate those frequencies inside of the actual bass itself with an EQ. So let's go ahead, grab an EQ, and then let's locate all of these frequencies. So here's this one. This will be the low one. Let's go ahead and we'll put this one right at 49. That'll be the lowest. That makes sense to me. 24, there's like nothing down there. There's barely anything down here as well. And so I'll just kind of narrow the Q up just a little bit where it kind of looks a little bit like that. Let's go ahead. Let's grab the next octave. And so 49 times 2 would be 98. So let's go ahead and let's select 98. I bet you didn't think that we were going to be doing math today, did you? Oh. We're doing some math, baby. And so I'll just go in here, type in 98, and then we're good. So there's the next octave. Let's go ahead and let's grab the next octave after that. So 98 times 2 is going to be 196, if I'm doing that properly. So let's go ahead. We'll tighten this up a bit. Wait a minute. We got to do a calculator here. 196. Okay, I was right. Gotta check. I gotta check. I always have to check. I'm like, that something's not quite right. But no, it was right. It was right. All right, 196. And then we'll narrow the Q up there as well. Okay, and so now we have a couple different frequencies that are here. We can go ahead and grab one more just for the sake of it. Probably not going to use it. And that one will 196 times 2 would be 392. 392. We're gonna double check just to make sure, because it actually does matter. Okay, 196 times 2. I'm sure. Yep, 392. I should trust myself more. I should just trust myself more. And now we have all different octaves that are here on this G note. And so now, yes, the fundamentals changing and things are shifting around as the notes are changing, but the overall body of the song is staying around that G. So let's go ahead and see if we can thicken up some of this bass by bringing in some of the octaves. Let's go start right here with the low notes that are here. And I'll go ahead and also bring it an octave higher too. So really be wearing headphones for this, because it really makes a big difference in headphones, specifically on these lower frequencies. Oh man, that added a ton. Let's go ahead. Let's add the next frequency in line. Let's go ahead and add the next frequency in line. And then the next frequency. So if we actually listen to each frequency, you can kind of hear the bo-da or bum, 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 bum. Kind of like those octaves that are jumping up through there. So you can see that there's all of these octaves that we have access to, and now we can tweak this tone to our liking. Now, I have done a pretty big set of moves down here, but that's like nothing to scoff at. Actually, like, could work really, really well in the context of the mix. So let's go ahead, let's dial in this tone. So EQ off, and then on. low end and thickening things out. Does a really good job. Now, the only difference that I'd make is I would then put the compression after, so the uppers and downwards compression after that EQ, because we are boosting some frequencies and I would like to lock things in specifically when we start hitting higher notes and different things here where it's going to change the overall sound. So let's go ahead and let's take a listen. Really cool. Really thickening up that bass. And now, once again, let's go ahead. Let's drop it down that full octave too. I can almost hear the note definition better with that EQ on. So once again, it's a bit of math. We figure out what the key of our song is in, and then we go ahead, we find that specific frequency on the EQ. We go ahead, we grab a couple octaves, we start boosting those up, and we are set. We can really set this in the mix, start dialing that in to wherever we like. And now let's take a listen to what this sounds like in the context of the mix. Now, there's a lot more than just the bass. If you are interested, I have a full session breakdown and the stems from one of my songs. You can click the top link down in the description below, and you can download that completely for free. You can go try it again. You can go ahead and you can download that completely for free. It's my gift to you for watching this video, and I think you'll really enjoy it. There's a lot of stuff that I break down on bass tones, guitar tones, drums, and all that other stuff that I think you'll really enjoy. All right, so let's dial in the next thing here. Let's see if there were some questions that I want to pull up. Awesome. Okay, so one of the questions that I got, just wanted to pull up the questions here. One of the questions that I got was, how do you mix electric guitars and make them sound massive? There's a handful of things that people do, and they're just massive mistakes all the time. After producing for well over a decade and working with rock and metal artists and coaching over 1,000 students at this point in time, I have noticed that there are a handful of things that people do that always just seem to overkill their guitars. They overmix their guitars. And the guitar tone starts at the tone, and then going into the mixing can really help. It could really make a big difference, right? So after producing for well over a decade and working with over 1,000 students, I have found that there are really just two things that people do to their guitar tones that absolutely kill them during the mixing process. And when you mix it right, it can sound like this. Dive into the first thing. First, let's take a listen to what these guitars sound like by themselves. So first, I am double tracking these guitars. I have one on the left, one on the right, and the guitar is intonated very well. I'm not copying and pasting this down. I am making sure that I'm doing two separate performances. Your guitar tone starts at your performance. If you don't nail the performance, the guitar tone is going to be way off. I was just working with one of my students, and he was really trying to dial in his guitar tone. After we spent some time dialing in his guitar tone, all of a sudden his mistakes were being revealed, and he realized he had to go and re-record a lot of his guitars because all of that gain and everything else that was going on in his guitar tone was hiding the fact that the performance was a little bit lackluster, and he needed to go back and re-record it. So he went back, re-recorded it with that new guitar tone, and things really changed for him. So we always start at the performance of the instruments. We want to make sure we're consistent, and we want to make sure that we're in time and we are tight. And you can go through and you can even time align things here. You can see that these chugs specifically, I really wanted tight. So they are really tight. I'm actually going in and I'm adding bend markers to time align those. Once we've gone in and we are making sure that we are performing our parts right, our guitar is intonated, it's got fresh strings on it, and it sounds great, then we can go and we can start with the guitar tone. Now, here's the thing that's going to blow most people's minds. Everything that you're hearing right now is pretty much mixed, done. I set it out this way, and yet there's not a whole lot on it. Take a look. So we have these guitars. They sound great. We've performed these well. I am using Archetype Nolly specifically for these guitar tones. And then to mix it, I have nothing. Nothing. Nothing is on here. Nothing is going. It's just that. That's it. Like, this is my guitar bus, and nothing's on the bus. These are the individual guitars. Nothing is on it. Everything that is great about these guitars is extremely tight and consistent takes and working at a really good tone. So I'll break down the tone, how I'm building this, but I really just want to dial this in. If you want it to sound like this, and you want your guitars to fill out like this, and you're adding mixing plugins, it's already too late. You got to go back and dial it in sooner. Now, let's dial in the guitar tone and figure out exactly what it takes to get a great guitar tone like this. So first, I want to go in and I want to adjust some things specifically. I want to go ahead and I want to choose a specific amp and then a specific cab. These two things are going to be a really big factor in the overall tone of the guitar. It'll shape everything. The difference in the cab will have a bigger impact than any EQ you could throw onto it afterwards. So what I do is I always go ahead and I just delete everything from here. Just the amp and the cab is the only thing that I want. So I go ahead and I remove a lot of this stuff. So just the amp and the cab is all I'm interested in. And I want to start dialing in a guitar tone that I'm really, really happy with. Oh, sorry, my bad. There we go. All right, so let's start off with making sure that we're finding a guitar tone that we actually are really after and we really like. Specifically, this guitar tone, I was looking for that more modern metalcore sound that sounds very similar to Poppy and Amira Alfeki, which I really enjoy. There's a lot of low end and low mids to this guitar tone, and it felt very modern, very polished, and it was something that I really enjoyed a lot. And so I wanted to start with the intention of the direction I wanted to go with the tone. If I was going for more Thal-like tone, like Throne, I would not use this guitar tone. So the guitar tone we choose is completely relevant to the direction we want to go with our song. And so because I wanted to do the Amira Alfeki and the Poppy genre in that route, I wanted to have some room in the low end and the low mids. So immediately I'm grabbing my amp here and I'm using the third amp here, which is essentially a 5150. And then I unlink the cabs and I'm going through and I'm selecting different cabs. I liked this one specifically because of the low end, but take a look. So it was really coming down to the last cab, cab number 4 or cab number 1 for me. And I ended up choosing cab number 1 because it did have that high end sizzle that I liked with some low end that was really working really well. And I went ahead and I adjusted some of the bass to bring in some of that low end as well. That's a lot of low end. I'm talking a lot of low end. Most people would initially go and start cutting everything out below that. But it's thinning up my guitar and it doesn't work. I want that really nice, thick guitar tone. And so having this EQ on just doesn't work. You're probably thinking, does it fight with the bass and everything else? Not really. I mean, you heard it. It sounded great. Everything sounded like it was fitting really well. The kick was cutting through. The bass was cutting through. All the other stuff was cutting through just fine. So if it sounds good, it is good. We don't need to go through and cut this stuff out because we think it's fighting. We are absolutely 100% allowed to have overlapping frequencies between our guitars, our synths, our bass, and everything else. That's part of how music is made. You only start cutting those if they become an issue. And I would say if your guitar tone is getting in the way of your bass tone and your drums, then you probably just want to go to the tone themselves and figure out what cab you're using. Maybe use a cab that doesn't have as much low end, or use a cab that maybe is a little bit more prominent in the mid-range where the bass isn't, for example. So we never really want to use so much EQ. Well, I don't want to say never. I typically don't like to use a whole bunch of EQ to shape my guitar tone. I would rather shape it at the actual guitar tone section itself. So here on the amp and then here down with the cabs. So already I'm feeling really good about this. Let's go to the cab, and I want to adjust the microphone to get that low end that I'm looking for without any of that like super high end sizzle. So the high end sizzle is there, but there's also some low end that's there. It's giving me a bit of bite I like in the mid range. Notice how me just adjusting that microphone is doing so much to the overall sound of this. Most people, once again, would go to an EQ, but if you start here, you start where it matters, it just makes your life so much easier during the mixing process. So now that I've got this tone that I'm looking for, I got that high end sizzle, I got that low end that I'm looking for, I've used my reference tracks well. Now I can start going in and I can start tightening some things up. I do want to add a bit of a drive to this just to tighten it up. And my personal hack I like to do a lot is I turn the drive knob down, but bring the level up and the tone up just a bit. This can kind of give some high end grit and bite to this. And I'm pushing the amp. Instead of using the drive pedal to make the drive, I'm actually using the level to drive into that amp to then push that amp a little bit harder. 5150s can take a significant amount of input gain really well. And so because of that, I like to use it. So let's go ahead. We'll turn that on and off and listen to the difference. This specific overdrive is modeled after a tube screamer, and it specifically is really good at tightening up the low end. There is a lot of low end in this guitar tone, and because of that, it can get slightly overwhelming, but tightening up that low end a little bit, specifically with that tube screamer, can help a ton. So listen specifically to the low end as I turn the drive on and off. Notice how it doesn't make the low end completely disappear. It just tightens it up just a little bit. Let's go ahead and look at our EQ here as well and pay attention to the difference that happens here in this EQ when we start to bring in that other one here as well. So let's go ahead. We'll turn the drive on and off, and we'll pay attention to the low end specifically. And notice how the low end is still there. It just tightens up just a little bit. That specific frequency here, right around that like 110 hertz, you can see starting to poke through a little bit. And with that drive, it keeps it a lot more consistent and kind of pushes it down in just a little bit. Pay attention one more time to that specific frequency. Once again, I am fixing some of these EQ moves that could be done at an EQ, but at the actual guitar tone level. That's because this is way this is a way better option because I'm going into the amp with this guitar tone. It's making that low end a lot more consistent. If I was to add an EQ here and cut that specific frequency, well, it's only flubbing and having that low end flub in certain areas and not in every single note. And so then I'd have to use dynamic EQ to make up for that, but I'm still not shaping the overall guitar tone. So because I wanted to tighten up the low end of that guitar a little bit because there was a decent amount there, I decided to use a tube screamer because that's part of the job of what a tube screamer can do, is tighten up that low end. Once again, I'm just going to reiterate this again. I am making even mixing decisions at the guitar tone level. It seems like a novel concept to some people. Sometimes people just throw on some sort of guitar tones and they just go wild with mixing afterwards, trying to fix it later. And trust me, I know because I used to be there. But when you get really good guitar tones at the source, you can do just about nothing else and be completely fine. So now we've tightened that up. I feel really good about that. Next is there is a lot of that high-end frequency content that I wasn't really enjoying, and anything below about 100 hertz was starting to have a little bit of an issue. And so I decided to go ahead and I added some EQ here. So let's go ahead, turn the EQ on and off. So I'm cutting around 6,000 hertz because there's a lot of that high-end content that I am filling out in other areas, which I'll show you in just a second. and I also have 250 hertz, which I was cutting just a bit, and then anything about below 100 hertz I felt was a little bit too much. There was that area from 100 to 110 that I felt really confident about. And so let's go ahead and take a listen. So I'm not really hearing too much of a difference other than some low flub content is getting out of the way when I boost this up by about 100. And so it felt pretty good. And then there's that high end. And once again, I dial this up or back depending on the song and depending on all the other layers that I have and along with it. It's just part of the nature of how this works sometimes. It's just how it works sometimes depending on the specific song that I'm doing. In this case, bringing it down to 6,000 hertz felt really nice. But in some other cases, bringing it up a little bit can be helpful too, depending on how much of that high-end sizzle I'm really looking for. So right around that 6,000 seemed to be a pretty good sweet spot for me. I know that seems like a lot, and I'm cutting out a lot, but once again, there's some other things in the mix that I'm blending along with the guitars to get it to sit well. And then, of course, there was like no reverb or delay that I had on this at all. And so it's doing absolutely nothing. And that is essentially the guitar tone. Now, I'll bring this back into the mix, and then I'll show you what I'm adding along with it. So, of course, same guitar tone on the left and the right. Then I'm bringing it in with the bass. And then I also have one extra thing, which is the synth Magic Maker. Whoop. Actually, I just caught a... And that synth specifically is just Serum, and I'm running a patch out, so I am compressing some of the low end, anything below about 205 hertz, and anything above that is going to that Nolly preset that we made earlier. So really cool stuff that's going on there. If you want an entire video about that, I'll leave a link to this in the description down below to an entire video of a walkthrough on that. And if you are interested, I do have a full session breakdown from one of my songs. You can get the stems for free, and I will go through the entire session breakdown process so you can actually see everything in depth, the drums, the bass, the guitars, all the plugins I'm using for everything. It's completely free. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. Let's get into how this is blending in with the guitars as well. So at the bass, the synth, and the guitars all sound like this together. And then in the context of the mix, so good. Everything's just fitting so well together. Now, if I wanted to enhance these guitars just a little bit more, because this is just about a final mix, but I do want to go just a little bit above and beyond and show you what I would do at the final process. I really don't need a whole lot here. The guitars don't need a whole lot of EQ. There's not a whole lot that's going on that's really standing out to me. But I do like adding a bit of saturation, specifically tube saturation, to these mixes. So let me go ahead and grab some tube. And I'm using London Virtual Tubes Collection from Slate Digital. It doesn't have to be this one, but some sort of tube saturation. And then I just want to bring up the saturation a little bit until I'm starting to get some thickness, specifically in the low mids. Listen to how that sounds in the context here. So it's adding a bit of brightness, bringing it a little bit more forward, and adding some of that low, mid, and mid content that I'm really enjoying. It's just saturation. Really kind of bringing that up a bit. Love it. And it's just adding an extra bit of sizzle and almost a teensy-weensy bit of chaos that I like to see in my guitar tones, specifically during these breakdowns, which I really like. And then I'm going and I'm adding a limiter after this. And specifically, I just want to make sure that I am bringing some of those high peaks down just a touch. I don't want to use compression necessarily because these guitars are already pretty naturally compressed when you run them through the amp and the saturation, distortion. The saturation naturally compresses the signal. And so after the guitars are already rendered out, they are already a pretty massive brick form of a wave. Let's take a look at what that actually looks like in the context here. So you can see here that this is pretty dynamic, right? You can see that there's the specific like plucks of the string, and you can see all the dynamics. These guitars are extremely dynamic because what you're seeing right now is the DI, the direct in of this guitar. But if I go ahead and I want to render this down to its own spot, so I'll bounce to new track. Look at what it looks like now. Completely compressed. So flat. This is way more dynamic because you're actually seeing the DI, but then it goes through the amp, everything that we just did, and it's compressing it down by a lot. Now, there are some little spikes and things up in here, but they're very short, and grabbing it with a limiter is going to be a better result than a compressor, at least that I found. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go on my bus again. So the saturation's on the bus. I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab my limiter, and I just want to bring the threshold down until I'm getting just a dB-ish of gain during those bigger sections, specifically during like the peaks here and going into those that breakdown specifically. You can see how it's starting to level that specific section out and bringing it down. So just tightening it up just a bit. So with the bus processing off, this is what the guitars sound like. And then on. And now with the context of the mix. Really tight. That's it. I want you to go try that out. Go work on your guitar tones. Make sure that your guitar is intonated, you're doing your performance properly, and you really work on your guitar tone. And you make guitar tone decisions almost like you're making mixing decisions, because you will get a way better mix at the end of it. If you have these crazy EQ moves all over the place, definitely start back at the beginning and start getting a great guitar tone at the source. That entire session breakdown is completely free. Links to that will be down in the description below. All right, let's get to the next question that I have. Let me see if any of you guys on the live stream as well. Yeah, it looks like it's pre-recorded. My apologies, man. Solly Norband. I record all of my stuff live, and then I like have my editor chop up the stuff live so that way I can go through the rest of the stuff. But then I also have these breaks and sections where I am talking to you guys directly. So my apologies on that. I know it looks like it's pre-recorded because I'm trying to like essentially like get these videos too where I can actually clip them up, right? It's been a pretty good section for me. All right, so let's go through. Hey man, love your content from the Philippines. Awesome, dude, from the Philippines, love it. I've been watching your content recently and trying to learn mixing and mastering. Dude, glad you're here. Love to help as much as I possibly can. I've been noticing a lot of metal rhythm guitars are darker than I thought. I know, Adam, right? It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Getting those guitar tones at the source can help a ton, and they're a lot darker than I would have expected as well. There are also bad outdated amp sims like THU and Bias Effects. Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, there. I think that the bad outdated amp sims like those specific ones, they're okay. Like THU, like I've gotten great results from THU. And so it's all of the like early 2000s stuff was recorded on the Line 6 Pod Go. Do you guys remember that? Line 6 Pod Go. It was that red bean looking thing. Do you guys remember seeing this thing? Like there was so much that was recorded back in the day with this. Like I'm sure that if you listen to metalcore and metal in like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I guarantee you that you have enjoyed some guitar tones that came from this little kidney bean. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And so yeah, like outdated, right? And I totally get where you're coming from. Like Neural DSP, I love Neural DSP. There's a reason why I'm using it, and I'm not using the Line 6 bean thing anymore, you know what I mean? But you can get great guitar tones with it, but it does take a little bit of extra mixing. I will say, like there's some harsh frequencies around 4K that Line 6 just never got right. And so because of that, like softening up some of those high mids can help a ton. All right. What are some other questions? Do you have any advice for recording vocals? Mine seem to sound okay, but no matter what I tweak, it doesn't have presence. So I figured the problem is at the source sound. Yeah, I have an entire masterclass on that. Go ahead and look up any of my vocal mixing. Like, go to my channel, go to like the top, like some of the top videos, and I have tons of videos on mixing vocals and getting it at the source. If you have a dynamic microphone, great. If you have a condenser microphone, make sure that your room is treated. You should have a treated room with a dynamic microphone as well, but it's not nearly as sensitive, so it does kind of like block out some of those room frequencies in some cases. Um, I love it. I like to use Own Hammer and New York Audio Iris. Interesting. I've never heard of any of those, but I might have to check them out. Let's see. I've noticed. Michael says, not noticing the ABEQ with my headphones. He just proved it. Oh man. Yeah, I should be I should be careful when I AB stuff and make sure that I'm actually checking the right buttons because every now and then, like I click the wrong one. I'm like, oh crap, you know. I totally get that. Yeah, no. Once again, EKXY7LH or E. I'm just gonna call you E. Said I think so. It's not a chat technically. Yeah, no. This isn't pre-recorded. This is live. Um, I love it. It's just I tried to like clip those sections of the videos out, right? So that I have interactions with you guys in between these little clips of videos and stuff like that I record. So I get like 3 or 4 videos out of a live stream. But you guys are the cool ones because you see everything. You see it all. You answering questions and everything else. Um, oh, you're really good at staying on script. I thought this was pre-recorded. Do you guys want to see my script? Do you guys want to see my script? I cannot stand. I got to show you this. I cannot stand the concept like AI just absolutely obliterating YouTube right now. It kind of irritates me. Like I'm not gonna lie, it pisses me off a little bit. Am I allowed to say that on YouTube? Probably. Probably not. The people are like using ChatGPT and like all these other like platforms to like write scripts for them, and you can always tell when somebody's written a script from AI because they'll say it's not talent. It's not your lack of talent. It's your this. It's not your lack of talent. You just don't know how to use your gear right. It's not your lack of gear. You just don't know how to use your gear properly. It's not this. It's this. It's like it just irritates me so much. And now everybody's sounding the same. And it's like how if I can go to ChatGPT and get an answer like that. If I wanted a ChatGPT answer, I would have gone to ChatGPT to get it. Thank you. No. No, thank you. I'm not going to sit and watch your 8-minute video from something that I could have just gotten from ChatGPT. So here's my script. I'm like, live stream next talking points, the base fundamental trick, title idea. Like I have like a title idea of what it is, and then like I want the problem, the proof, and then the promise. That's like what I have in the hook. So I like, and once again, I'm just like the problem is metal mixes are pretty dense, so I'm revealing the problem to you guys. I'm saying, hey, this is the proof. I've been producing for over a decade. I'm a professional producer. I've worked with over 1,000 students. My promise to you is by the end of this video, you're gonna know what to do to get your bass to sound better using this specific EQ trick, right? And then I just like have and then the next one, like the no BS guide for mixing metal guitar. The next video idea that I'm going to be doing here in just a second is the difference between mixing 6-string and 7-string guitars. This is my script, and yes, like I'm like talking around a little bit, and I get that. And if I had a script and I did things word for word, um, maybe the videos would be slightly better, but I don't think that it would be better as far as you getting the information that you need. Genuinely. I genuinely think that when you see some of those in between, some of the mistakes that I make, or some of the other things that I'm mentioning, or where I'm ranting on about music production and stuff like that, I think that is more valuable to you. At least I believe so. I believe it's more valuable to you because you get to see more of it. You're getting more than just what a generic chat GPT answer would be. You know, like, no, you are definitely making really great mixing decisions. Like, if you ever talk to ChatGPT or any of these AI platforms about mixing, it's like they just gaslight you into believing that you're like the world's greatest, and then you listen to your track and you're like, no, that's not even the case. I love it. Yeah, are you a Christian? I like your shirt. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thank you. I appreciate it. Pretty neat shirt. Pretty cool. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. All right, let's get into the next one. I had the Pod X3 kidney bean. Yeah, those were pretty cool, weren't they, man? I love those things. I really did. Never heard of. Yeah, I'll have to check out. Okay, let's do this right now. Okay, so what did you say? Warhammer. I'm copying and pasting this into Warhammer and York Audio. Let me go to our Own Hammer, not Warhammer, and then York Audio. Oh, impulse responses. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Great stuff. For these guys that don't know, impulse response is basically just something you can load into your amp sim to get really good guitar tones. Basically meaning that like it's just a cab. It's a cab emulation. They they got some orange stuff. Yeah, see the thing is I have a lot of these. Like the Fenders, the orange, Friedman was nice. I don't think I have very many Friedmans. Oh, Matchless was another good one. I am looking for more of the Zilla cabs too. I loved Giga Drum's Zilla. Their Zilla cabs are really, really good. If you guys have used some of those, and then Impulse Responses, Fractal Line 6, Wave Audio. Oh, the Ampegs, solid. Man, I'm gonna have to check some of this stuff out. I've really been looking forward to finding like a good Freeman recently, and found our favorite modern progressive. That's pretty cool. I like that, low tuned. Yeah, that's pretty neat. That's actually that leads us right into our next thing, specifically low tuned guitars. I got this question the other day. Somebody said, "How do you mix 6-string versus 7-string differently?" They were getting into the project. They had just recorded some 7-string, and they realized that there were some issues. Real quick, let's go ahead reset my camera before I get into the next one. I gotta get a new camera. I feel like a lot of Adam says I feel like a lot of impulse response. I have a lot of impulse responses, but now I feel like I need it with all the mic placements because it's just a single snapshot. Yeah, yeah, that is one of the biggest. When it comes down to uh, when you have the microphone placements inside the amp itself, it is a lot nicer. It really is. You can go ahead and you can make some quick adjustments, which I like. And like, yes, they have different impulse responses where they're like at different points, but it makes it a lot nicer, right? And so, in my opinion, I prefer doing this. And if I can keep it inside here, but like Nolly, Adam Nolly Get Good, like in my opinion, one of the world's greatest engineers engineered these cabs meticulously, and they sound great. So I'm just gonna use it. Just just that's just what I'm gonna do. And like I do have some other stuff, and I've loaded some stuff in if I'm looking for something very specific. But most of the time, I can get everything I want out of these 4 cabs and these options for microphones here. I'm gonna be fine, and I don't have to worry too much about it, right? So that's just typically what I do. That's typically what I do. So yeah, I had a question where somebody asked me, "How do you mix 7-string differently than 6-string?" And I have been mixing rock and metal for a very long time, and I've coached over 1,000 students at this point. And I've noticed that the difference between 6 and 7-string is not as drastic as you think, but there is a specific thing you have to pay attention to on extended scale instruments, like a 7-string. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how we're able to mix 7-string versus 6-string and the differences between the two and when it actually matters. So above all else, the difference between a 6-string and a 7-string is pretty self-explanatory. It is 6 or 7 strings, and the guitar itself is extended. So it is an extended scale instrument. Let me go ahead and actually show you one of my instruments here. So this is my 7-string Jackson, and it adds an extra string on the low end. So instead of it being a low E, like you're typically normally used to seeing, it adds a low B. But in this case, I'm in drop A. So instead of this being a low B, this is now a low A. So just like it almost like repeats. So if you have an 8-string, it also just repeats. So you know how it goes all the way down to E. E is your first one here. The next one would be B. The next one would be G. So if you have an 8-string, then that would be the same thing where it goes E, and then it would go B, and it would go G. But you could also do drop tuning as well, which is super helpful. And I do drop tuning here. So it's almost just like playing drop D, like if you've done drop D before on your normal 6-string, or drop C on your 6-string, right? But it adds an extra low note. Boom. And now you can go lower than that if you want to. And it doesn't really matter how low you go. The thing that matters is the fact that it is an extended scale instrument. Now, here's the thing. Most people think that just because it's 7-string, it's different. And it is because of the extended scale, but if you have a 6-string guitar with those extra low notes as well, like let's say you've tuned it down and you're doing like drop A on a 6-string, you need to pretty much process it the same way. So let's get into the processing of these extended scale instruments, whether you're using a low tuned 6-string or a 7-string with that extended scale. But I will say, before we get into that, there's something extremely important that we do need to that we do need to tackle. It is understanding the frequencies. So let me grab a snapshot of one of these EQs here real quick. So let's go ahead. I'll grab an EQ, and then I just want to grab a quick snapshot of this. Teach off of it. So, as you can see, that there is an 50 hertz, 100 hertz, 200 hertz, 500 hertz, 1K, 2K, 5K, 10K, all the way up. So from 20 hertz all the way to 20,000 hertz. And you can see that there's a piano down here, like some piano notes. And each one of these frequencies are representative of a note, or even sometimes in between the frequencies, they're actually representative of notes in between notes. So outside of the 12-note Western scale. But 440 hertz is an A note. And so an A note would be somewhere right around. Bring that back. Where's my draw tool? Here we go. So an A note would be right at that 440 hertz, which is right here. Now, if we bring down a full octave, it is now 220, which would be right about here. And then we go down another octave, it would be 110, which is right here. And we go down another octave, it would be about 550 or 55, sorry, which is right about there. And so every time we divide the number by 2, cut it in half, we are going down a full octave. And every time we go up, we are going up a full octave. So let's say you were playing the lowest A string you could on your 6-string guitar. It would probably be right around that 220 hertz. But because the extended scale 7-string goes down another full octave, that would set right around here at that 110. I'm probably wrong about that. It might be like here and here, but the concept remains the same, that it is another full octave below. So that low A on my 7-string is another full octave below the lowest A on my 6-string. And so, therefore, we need to adjust our tone differently to be able to make up for that, specifically the low end. The low end of stuff really matters. I want you guys to see this specifically. This is something that Nolly had said.
The lower you tune on.
He said the lower that you tune, and once again, we'll play this here. He said, Nolly had said the lower that you tune on bass, the harder it is to kind of get things to set in the mix, specifically with that tone. And it matters too with electric guitars and everything else. Listen to what Nolly has to say here.
With that, I was pretty much done as far as the bass processing on this track. The lower you tune on bass, I feel like the more problems you run into with managing the low end, but in E standard, it's really quite easy going. So that's a relatively easy bass track to work with.
The lower the tone, the lower the tunings, the more issues you run into. And that's because there's just not a whole lot of room down in the low end. Like we saw earlier, 55 hertz to 110 is a full octave. That's like 50 hertz difference. But yet 2K to 4K up here, there's 2,000 hertz difference between those octaves. So there is so much less room in the low end that you have to work with. And because of that, you really have to pay attention to your low end. And if you cut the low end out of those electric guitars, you could be cutting the fundamental of that note you're trying to hit. So you do have to process them differently. So here's what I do specifically to process my 7 strings a little bit differently than my 6 strings. First, I want to make sure that I'm set up properly, my intonation's tight, everything is looking really good, so the performance is tight. Let's take a listen to this here. I get in here and I know that my performance is tight and I've done a really good job. I've double tracked things. But specifically, when it comes to creating the guitar tone, above all else, I want to make sure that I'm not overwhelming the guitar tone with a bunch of saturation and low end content. So as I go in here, let's take a look at this amp and let's listen to the guitar tone. So I don't have a whole lot of drive. There's still a decent amount of drive here, but if I turn this overdrive off, that overdrive is really just kind of handling some of the low end, and it's really not doing a whole lot as far as adding more drive to this. And the amp itself, the gain is set at a pretty decent low mid kind of area, like right around that 4 to 5, and that's where it's at. A lot of people crank it up here, and then it starts to fold those low end frequencies, and there's just so much saturation that you lose that note definition that you'd get in that low end that you specifically want for an extended scale guitars. It's just like folding things over and making things sound flubby. But if we actually dial the gain back to a more natural level, so not adding too much gain is the first thing that I do, and it's also one of the first mistakes that I see beginner producers and mixing engineers make when they're dialing in guitar tones for this specific genre, especially on extended scale guitars. The next mistake that I see them make is they don't choose the cab properly. When you choose the cab on extended scale instruments, you want to make sure that you are paying attention if that cab can actually handle the kind of low content you're handling it or sending its direction. Specifically, there are cabs out there, just like Michael, you said, and you had mentioned that there was that. Man, I wish I could pull that up. I wish I would have saved that. I'm gonna look that up again. You said York Audio. I want to go York Audio again, or the other one was the other one? Old Owen Hammer. Yep, let's go to Owen Hammer real quick. I want to pull that up. So you can see that there are companies out there that make specific, like low-tuned, extended scale cab impulse responses, and because they know that having these lower tunings can sometimes make these typical guitar speakers that are not really made for that kind of start to fall apart, and they can't quite create it. It's like adding a subwoofer to your home studio, and all of a sudden things are just like, whoa, all of that low end just started to show up. It's because the speakers aren't necessarily made for everything below that specific frequency. And same thing with guitar cabs. So we want to make sure that we're choosing a cab that can actually handle those low tunings. So let's go through. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off my overdrive, and I'm going to change the different cabs here and listen to the low end and how that actually changes. So I feel like that first cab there specifically is actually bringing out some of that low end that I'm actually looking for in this guitar tone. And then I tighten it up just a little bit with my overdrive. Those are things that we have to pay attention to when we are doing lower tuned guitars or extended scale guitars, because those fundamentals and those frequencies just don't exist in standard guitars and standard tuning guitars. And so if you are bringing your tuning down lower and you're going double drop C, drop F, drop A, you're starting to go to really low tunings, you have to pay attention to where that fundamental is actually hitting. You want to make sure you don't cut it out in your guitar tone, or else you're going to lose the actual note and the note definition of that. And then you want to make sure that you don't overcook it with saturation and drive on your amp, and you want to make sure that you also pay attention to the cab you're choosing for that. That is going to be different depending on 6-string and 7-string, and that is going to be the majority of where I spend my time. The rest of the mixing that happens is all going to be about the same. I'm going to go to a bus. I'm probably going to add a little bit of saturation here. I'm going to use a little bit of limiting, and that's going to be pretty much standard across the board, whether I'm using 6-string or 7-string. The only thing that I'd pay attention to is maybe using an EQ and looking through some of those frequencies that might be a problem, but specifically, I would rather just solve the issue right at the actual amp itself. If I can change everything that I want at the amp itself and make those decisions there at the actual guitar tone, when I load the guitar tone back up later, I know that it's going to sound great, and it's going to sound great at the source. This is what at the source means. Having a really nice intonated guitar with great performances going into a really solid amp and making these decisions here. Instead of making EQ decisions, start making cab and gain decisions and adjusting the EQ on your amp itself to make up for that. That is the difference between 6-string and 7-string guitars. Again, if you want a full session breakdown of one of my songs and you want to dive into the drums, the bass, the synths, and everything, get the stems for free. Links to that will be down in the description below. I'll leave it right at the top. You can download that completely for free. Awesome. All right. That's about it for today. Let me go ahead and answer some extra questions here. I remember seeing advice somewhere that you should actually cut lower tuned guitars higher and make them more mid-rangey instead. It might be genre dependent though. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I've been doing this for I guess 14 years now, something like that. I typically don't do that. Like unless I'm going for something very specific, it just doesn't make any sense. And you can have those overlap of frequencies. That's the thing that people just don't seem to understand. Like I get on YouTube and people are like, there's overlap of frequencies. Like let's use track spacer and let's use dynamic sidechain EQ, or let's use Sooth 2 with sidechain mode to fix these overlapping frequencies, and they call it masking, right? Well, yeah, there can be masking issues, but just because a frequency is overlapping with another frequency does not mean that it is a problem. There is so much low end in this guitar. I mean, like a significant amount of low end in this guitar. Like below 100 hertz. And some stuff that's also going on down here that probably doesn't need to be there, but check it out in the context of the mix and tell me if we really have to cut it out. Guess what also has a lot of low end? This bass. And this synth. All of this is just a bunch of low end, and they are overlapping with one another, but it's not the end of the world. It's not causing a problem. If it's causing masking issues, then you can go in and try to make some adjustments there. But you can see that there's already a lot of low end in my guitars, there's a lot of low end in my synth, there's a lot of low end in my bass, there's a lot of low end in my drums, and it's overlapping with one another, and it's completely fine because we're supposed to hear the band as a whole, as an entire band. And we don't want to hear things with that complete separation. Otherwise, we would just listen to the stems. We do want some overlap and some things played together. That bass and that kick fitting with one another. The guitar tones and the bass tones wrapping around one another and complementing one another. You can have overlap in your guitars. You can have overlap in your frequencies. It's totally fine. It's only a problem when things start to disappear because you added stuff. If you go ahead and you go through and you start muting some things, and all of a sudden, your bass appears, or you mute your guitars and your vocals appear, that's when you know you have a masking issue. And then you can go in and you could address it there. Choose a different guitar tone that doesn't get in the way of your vocals. Mix your vocals differently to get them around that. Try using different microphones. Try different things to get it to set separately before you immediately go to plugins like Track Spacer or Sidechain Sooth 2, for example, right? Michael says, you're one of the few telling the truth about overlapping. Unfortunately. And I get it. It's because it's like this light bulb moment. And it would be so nice to make a video, post it on YouTube, and talk about the overlap of frequencies and show you the graph and show you how everything is overlapping. And I'll grab an EQ and then I'll sidechain it to my guitars. And then we'll take a look and I'll be like, you can see the two different colors that are here. Let's grab this and the guitars. And then I can say like, oh my gosh, well, like it's all like they're all overlapping with one another. There's all of these issues that's happening between all of these other instruments, right? We'll listen to it on the bass. It's like, Well, yeah, there's some overlap here, but that's not the end of the world. It's not a problem. It doesn't matter. It really just doesn't. And that's why I think that people kind of get just caught up into that. It would be nice to make a video like that and have it blow up and make people think that I'm super smart because I have all of this overlap. Like there's masking issues and all of these other things, but really at the end of the day, if you're having masking issues, it's not Sooth 2's problem to solve it for you, or even Trackspacer. It's really down to making better decisions earlier in the process. Go ahead and start muting things one at a time. And if all of a sudden your vocals appear, you mute your bass and your kick drum appears, then you know that you have an issue and you might want to adjust the tone on your bass. And you could also then go in and add some EQ moves and things like that. It's really always, almost always, it's just a simple process. The things that really like become hyperbolic, people think is the secret sauce. It's because they've never heard of it before. But really, at the end of the day, the professionals, they never don't do the basics. And I have a double negative there intentionally. The pros never don't do the basics. They're always doing the basics. And they're always getting stuff sounding great right at the source. I got to tell you a story about this where I had downloaded, everybody's probably done Nail the Mix, especially in this genre at some point in time. And I had downloaded a bunch of stems. I was super excited to get into Nail the Mix. And this is like back when they were like really first starting out. I load all of these into my DAW and I press play. And my jaw hits the floor because the unmixed tracks sounded better than my mixed ones. Ugh. It was such a painful experience for me. And I realized I was trying to solve the wrong problem. I went into this thinking that I needed to get better at mixing, but really what it boiled down to was I need to get better at really great performances and tight performances on my guitars, on my bass, and tightening up decisions and making these tone decisions earlier in the mix and thinking about the mix at the production level and at the recording level. I was just throwing mics in front of stuff and like trying to call it good and moving on. And it was just such a problem. And things sounded really bad because of it. It was such a visceral moment for me. I remember like actually having a bit of like a pit in my stomach of realizing that, I get it now. And then I went back and spent a long time trying to work on that earlier stuff. And so it's never just, but those things that they become hyperbolic because somebody shows one plugin trick and they show an AB of it and it makes a big difference. But really they're showing a track that sounded great to begin with already. Just the way that it is. And so, yeah, I'm here to speak the truth on that. And I really just go ahead and before you start adding any of these advanced mixing tricks, if your stuff doesn't sound great right at the source, please just go back. Try earlier, try sooner, and try to fix that stuff earlier in the mix. The overcooking problem. Been there, done that. No joke. Yeah, no joke. I saw that advice too when I asked AI, but you can't always trust AI. Yeah. That's the thing that drives me nuts because AI is taking a look at everything on YouTube and then like trying to like what is the most popular advice? But the most popular advice is the stuff that gets views. Like this video is not going to get a whole lot of views. And so the most popular advice is the stuff that gives views. And so that's the stuff that AI is scraping to then promote to people and tell people like this is the issue that you actually have. And then people are going in and they're making decisions based off, they're making mixing decisions when in all reality, the issue is actually a production decision. And AI can't listen to your music right now. Kind of where we're at. So we have to understand the reality of that. It's just, there could be good advice at the wrong time. And that's the truth, man. That's the truth. All right. Any other questions before we sign off? I see. E says, do you write songs as well? I do. I wrote this one, the one you're listening to. I have written it. And I'm still working on finishing the rest of it. Let's go ahead. As you guys are throwing in some extra questions, if you have any, let's go ahead and just take a listen to this track of what we have so far already. And we'll go from there. still got a ways to go on this track, but really enjoying it. Probably gonna throw some vocals on it and whatnot. This actually might be something that I actually release under my own artist project. I typically don't. Like what I do like all day, every day is produce for other people. So yeah, that's the way that it works. Awesome, you guys. It's been great hanging out, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace.